Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of How to Harad, and in this one I think we will try to draw our campaign to a close, or near enough to one. We're not necessarily going to try for total victory here. This is, after all, a bit of a let's play, a bit of a sort of advice giver, and at this point we're sitting really pretty, actually, and we have been doing well for quite some time. We own, quote-unquote, 34 provinces. Now, several of those are actually owned by our protectorates, and thus don't really count towards getting us that victory video, but we've got, let's say, 34 out of 45 that we need. All that we're missing in terms of which specific provinces we have to hold would be, let's see, Dol Amroth, Linhir, and Pelargir, and these are these three coastal settlements right here. As part of taking the coasts, we would be getting those three, probably plus these other keeps, plus a handful of other settlements around here, and I think probably a sort of end point for us to take Gondor would be pretty much everything from the Morthond, I think this is, over to the east. So we don't really need to concern ourselves with a couple of settlements that are far out into the west. We certainly could grab the fort there, grab the, I think, Arendal, and then maybe finish up by taking this. That would get us about to our end point. That's certainly one approach. The problem is if we were to pursue that military approach, focus on Gondor, focusing on getting our number up to 45, we would be neglecting what seems to be by far the bigger threat at this point, and that is the Kingdom of Adunabar. Now, there are a few ways we could handle them. They, of course, have been laying really low, very much under the radar, and I did watch back some of my previous footage. Minas Ithil was in the hands of the Reunited Kingdom. I don't know how far the Reunited Kingdom got. There is another fort over here, and I'm guessing they probably didn't even get to take this fort, or if they did, never got further into Mordor than that. But Adunabar came back, and probably as a result of my strangling the fleets and the economy of the Reunited Kingdom by the coast, and Adunabar just continuing the pressure, and also me taking out Rohan no doubt weakened this faction and allowed Adunabar to flourish in the south. So all of those things combined to make sort of a stalemate here that ultimately was going to lead to the collapse of the Reunited Kingdom. But Adunabar has managed to hold itself in a very strong position. One way we could approach this new threat, and it is a threat even though we're not nearly at war, you can see their clear intentions here. As soon as we took Minas Anor to get a bunch of assassins in the area and get a bunch of armies onto our new territory, well, we could certainly sally out and try our military might against them, and that could be sort of an interesting approach. However, we've got these protectorates, and we've got 500,000 Mirian just sitting around in the bank. And part of the reason for getting protectorates is to throw around ridiculous amounts of money at your problems. That's sort of part of the fun of playing a faction like Harad, which can become very wealthy anyway, and then just cranking that up even farther. So let's get our emissary over, and we'll see what we can do with regards to Adunabar. So here is Adunabar's list of settlements and forts that we could demand. The only settlement or fort that they own that would not appear on their list here would be their capital. And we could sort of use a process of elimination to figure out what that is. I'm guessing that's Barad Eden. No, actually that does appear here. So it's some other place. They've got a capital somewhere else. But we could ask for any of these, and this gives you a sense of what they actually possess. We're going to ask for a couple of settlements. We're going to go for Minas Ithil, and we're going to ask for the Tower of Cirith Dûath. I happen to know that this is the fort that is located just to the east of Minas Ithil. We're going to ask for those, and we're going to offer a bunch of money. And let's go for 100,000. I know that's probably way too much, but let's just see if they'll do it. Yep, they'll take it. Okay. Now we own both of those settlements. We're not at war with Adunabar yet. There's going to be a bit of delay here as their agents get out of those settlements. But now we own those, and in fact, Minas Ithil is very happy with us. Cirith Dûath, it's going to be a bit touchy, but we can get rid of these troll caverns, so stop them from training those annoying units, these Uruk breeders. Forts are very important, actually, for Adunabar when they're going cultic. And so that leaves public order at 65. That's kind of okay because I don't really want to hold this fort. I actually want to turn around and give this to the Reunited Kingdom. So let's get our emissary over here. And we're going to offer the fort of Kirith Duath, and we'll just see how this works. The Tower of Kirith Duath, and we're going to offer them some money as well, just so they'll take it. Again, it's a little unrealistic and unfortunate that that it has to be this way. Now, we could attempt just offering it to them. We could try, no money in addition to this, or we could try for offering just 1,000. But there we go. Happy to give them that much. Now we've got we're sort of stuck here because we've got some men, and the game has run out of places to leave them. So I've never seen this before, actually. The problem is, as you can see, maybe you can't see, there's virtually no place for this unit to be. These are the Dunedainic peasants at arms that you get from diplomatically acquiring a settlement in Gondor's territory, apparently. But I can't, there's just no room, right? There's no north-south path here, and so we've got armies on either side of me. So probably the thing to do would be just to disband all of these units. But I can't for some reason, because we don't exist. I don't know. This is very, very unusual. We've got an emissary right over here. Okay, right. He's over there. So at any rate, we've now basically interposed the Reunited Kingdom between us and a Dunabar. And it means that now if a Dunabar wants to attack us, they will have to first get through this. So now that we've got that secure, I feel like going ahead and buying Emin Arnin. So let's see if we can do that as well. I'm not going to offer quite as much this time. It's a little less important to me. But I'm going to demand Emin Arnin. And I actually need to find a Dunabar, so let's go down there. All right, let's offer 7,000 for Emin Arnin. That seems a little low. They want trade, and they want 31 grand. You know what? Sure. We'll do that for a bit of trade and 30,000 Mirian. Now we have boxed in our protectorate Harandor, meaning Harandor is no longer serving as a buffer for us. And what we may want to do is give them some territory somewhere else so that they can continue to serve as a buffer. One candidate could be Minas Ithil. We could set up Harandor right here, and that would actually protect us not only from the east but also from the north, because any faction heading down from Daggerlad has to go through North Ithilien, which is controlled by this settlement. I don't think that's something I want to do just yet, but just to sort of keep that in mind, that is a possibility. If we really want to keep out another faction, we can have a protectorate do it for us. But I think in the meantime, having the trade from Minas Ithil and Emin Arnin and everything is going to be very much worth it. Now, one problem here is Emin Arnin is very unhappy with us. We've started to get a lot of settlements, and so the unrest is starting to ramp up. We can fix that a little bit by lowering the taxes and destroying a bunch of these buildings. And part of the issue does appear to be that they've got these cultic buildings. Now, this is actually a good example of a settlement building that you may want to keep, even though it is not doing quite what you would expect. So our faction currently is Ways of Darkness, right? This is the quote-unquote the native alignment for several of the factions on the map, including Harad. We could, however, turn to the Shadow Cult. And so in places like Gondor or Mordor, where you are going to run into cultic factions like a Dunabar, you may find these cultic buildings already built. And at that point, you may think, well, I'm not a cultic faction, I'm just going to destroy it. You certainly could, but then you would actually lose all of these benefits. And this building is giving us a 15% law boost. It's going to increase our tax income, population growth, and all those types of things. Now, it's not actually going to allow us to train cultic units like it says here, because we're not actually a cultic faction, but we get the other benefits from it. So it would be a little rash for us to just destroy this building at the moment. So I think we'll keep the temple. But we could get rid of some other buildings if we were concerned about that. Guild of Weaponsmiths, for example, is a specialization building that a Dunabar has built. We can just ditch that one. Part of the issue with public order in places that you acquire through diplomacy is that, of course, you haven't destroyed the population. You have not enslaved or exterminated them. So we've got almost 12,000 people inside Emin Arnin. And so there is a fair amount of overcrowding occurring, and also, more to the point, our garrison is just so low relative to that population. Of course, one thing we could do is increase the garrison by bringing in more troops. In Minas Ithil, you notice we don't have this problem because the population here is much, much lower. So lowering taxes there will help a little bit. But the game, because it needs to give you something, will give you units that are available to train or available in the region in some other way. And in this case, you can see we've got a bunch of mercenaries. That's because, I believe, these are chief cities. And so these local mercenary units can be retrained here. And the game doesn't distinguish between units that can be retrained versus units that can be trained from scratch. So at minus Ithil, what that means is acquiring that diplomatically gets you a bunch of these actually very expensive but very effective Blackland mercenary units, in addition to the more common Gondorian swordsman types. So this is actually sort of a nice benefit. What I think we'll do is move some of these troops down to Emin Arnon just to sort of help out temporarily. All right, stuffing that with swordsmen and black shields and so on gets us up to 70%. That's the magic number, so we'll just hold on to that. Our population is falling, fortunately, so that will increase the ratio of our garrison to unrest in the region, and that'll just help everything even out. Minus Ithil, you can see, can be held down quite happily with a very, very small garrison indeed. So we won't worry too much about that. Now, unfortunately, Minus Ithil is more of a fort at this point than anything else. You'll see there's nothing to be built, not even provincial pacification. That's because this is more of a ruined settlement, actually. If you were to take time to read this description, you would see that this is essentially in the wake of the War of the Ring. The settlement has been kind of ruined, and only a Dunedainic faction, like the Reunited Kingdom or a Dunabar, could reconstruct this as a full-fledged city. So here what you can do is retrain local mercenaries. You can get, an emissary out of here, but that's really it. So it is, of course, providing some trade, so you will get some nominal income there. You get a bit of income tax as well, although I guess we're not trading at the moment because of probably armies blocking trade, but that will come online. You can see the little wagons moving across the bridges here. So it does provide income, but it's really important as a buffer for us. Well, since we had so much success with a Dunabar and our diplomatic overtures, I think we may give it another try with Dunland. This may be a bit trickier, as we are, of course, still at war with them, but I would like to try to acquire Dunkriok. So let's offer them a single payment. Let's go with another 100,000 Mirian, and we're going to ask just for Dunkriok, just that one settlement right there, right near the fort of Dol Baran, and they'll take it. Okay, now the primary reason I want this is not so much because I want to hold it or strategically keep it, although it would be useful. If I really wanted to take this and keep it, doing what I just did would actually be a very bad idea. Because, as you can see, public order is 0, even on low taxes. The population is just too high, and this settlement is just too far away. And the units you get are just too tiny to make any kind of a difference. I'll go ahead and train, another emissary in the region just to have it. We can destroy a bunch of buildings, but more importantly, I'm curious to see what we would have available if we built in Dunland proper. For local levies at Tier 1, we would get Dunlandish Spearmen levies. That's basically their tribal spearmen unit, most notable for a missile attack. Not really excellent, but they do have pretty decent unit sizes, actually. At Tier 2, we would get Huntsman levies, which are basically skirmishers, and then we would start to get our own native troops. If we were following Ways of Darkness overall in our territory, you'd see us get Footmen of Harad, Plainsmen skirmishers, and the same if we were following the cult. At Tier 3, this is where we would begin to need military development. We would start to get stuff like Swords of Harad and Haradwaith Riders. So this is actually fairly decent. And then at Tier 4, you can see that we would get some much more interesting units. Spearmen of the Serpent and Archers of Harad. If we were cultic, we would trade the Archers and Horsemen of the Harnan and Spears of the Serpent for Swords of the Shadow. I'm not sure if that trade is really worth it. Swords are quite a good unit. But the Assimilation unit, so this is a unique unit that we would be able to train in Dunland, is Vassal Pikemen. Very, very interesting. And I really love the idea of playing as Harad and acquiring some land in Dunland and then eventually getting up to these guys. They've got a quite low upkeep. There's 80 men per unit. They've got a decent defense, but they have pikes, and that gives them some interesting properties. They're fairly aggressive. You don't want to just use them sort of in a static line necessarily. I find that the best results work when you can have them seeking out enemy cavalry, of course, and it just seems cool to have a bunch of pikes under the banner of the Black Serpent. But yes, I have no illusions about holding this settlement. This was mostly just to see what was available. And as you can see, Dunland is a pretty decent place. I believe it counts as a fiefdom, not an outland, for Harad, meaning that if you did want to do basically what I've done here, move into Rohan, take them out, and then start moving into Dunland, you could make a pretty decent show of it. Again, what you'd want to do is not buy the settlement. Of course, I have the money to burn to do so, but instead conquer it through force of arms. And one way that we could do this, we could have just been a little patient and handled it more methodically, would be to take out Calenhad, since it's no longer needed to buffer us from any factions over here. We could buy this, or probably conquer it with my Aldburg army, move them down here, take Calenhad, and then we would be able to communicate with our southern troops, get some reinforcements up here, and then prosecute a proper war against Dunland, sacking the settlement, exterminating the population, and then kind of building it up from there. But if we wanted to do that again in the Fourth Age mod, you have to conquer more methodically than I've been doing. You do want to take your time, allow settlements to become integrated into your kingdom, like we're trying to do here with the Outland Dominion. But what I want to show here today is maybe how the fleet attack would be prosecuted against the Reunited Kingdom. So we'll sort of skip ahead to that part. So diplomacy pays big dividends, and as you can see, we are no longer troubled by these 2.5 stacks of Adunabar right outside minus Honor. They have all decided to head north. That's because they're now completely off their territory. They no longer border us, although they do on the north side. But they didn't at first, and so they were compelled basically to move off our land when they found that their approaches to the rear were essentially cut off. So now might be a good time to gift minus Ithil to Harandor, let's say. We're not going to ever build this up. It's not going to provide a major force for us. So we could just gift this to Harandor. We'd still get the trade income from it, and they would be in charge of holding it for us. We could alternatively have given Kirath Duath to Harandor rather than to the Reunited Kingdom, but I'm not sure if they would hold it any better. I guess that may be something to consider. All right, so we've got an emissary over to Harandor. We're going to give them 5,000 Mirian as well as minus Ithil, and that does work, fortunately. I was a little concerned about this because the AI sometimes can refuse diplomatic offers, right, even if they're your protectorate. And so it could be, that could have been an opportunity for them to do some, who knows, some shenanigans like dropping our alliance. I almost never see that happen. In fact, I don't think I have ever seen the AI drop a protectorate with me diplomatically that way. But you always want to make sure you sweeten the deal by throwing in a bit of cash, and in our case, we can well afford it. So now minus Ithil is protected by a bunch of mercenaries and Harandor, and this also gives Harandor the sense that they're not completely surrounded by us, and it protects our northern border. So from here on, we could basically, ignore the north and the east. If we don't want to hold this territory, we don't want to get into a long war that stretches up into Rovanion or deep into Mordor, we could certainly do that. Basically, now we are again insulated from the potential threat of a very strong Adunabar attack, and we could now freely move our armies around. Again, I think the good policy here is going to be moving these troops out of Aldburg. Let's see how the public order looks here. Yeah, it's quite bad, so we're going to need to wait a little bit or move some reinforcements in. But basically moving troops out of Aldburg down to Calenhad to keep Rohan bottled up, conquer that, and then we can move our large army down south, probably to take Arnak since it's right on the way. Our fleets, though, we can start moving. We've got our largish army down here, and we're going to meet it up right at, Harmen, or Karasnan, rather. And we can get all of these troops inside. And now we've got almost a full stack. Very good. This will be our main strike force. And then we've got some other troops that we have been training. Yes, we've got some guys right here. As well as this quite formidable force, actually. And they're going to meet up with some of these troops over at Harlorn. Right, let's get them out of the city just so I don't forget them. And as you can see, public order here is quite good. We've got our capital at Harngond, so that keeps everyone in the region nice and happy. I think in terms of strategy here, what we're going to do is send this force probably over towards Dol Amroth and the stronger one, the larger army at any rate, probably towards Pelargir. And with those two fleets hitting, the Reunited Kingdom is not going to have a whole lot to say about it. Well, we've moved our forces out of Aldburg over to Calenhad, and before laying siege, I had the foresight to send a spy inside the gates, and he's actually opened the gates. So I think we will go ahead and do an assault there. Now, this is a pretty weak Eorling army here. There's a nobleman. He's, of course, leading a Riders of the King's House unit, but everything else is this Dunedainic levy type stuff. The militia levies are basically the Dunedainic militia, and the swordsmen are basically the King's swordsmen. These guys are, fairly decent, but I think the balance of power bar is in our favor, so let's go ahead and auto-resolve this. We did get a clear victory. We, of course, took far more losses than we would have had normally. But just for the purposes of demonstration, we'll show what that looks like. And yeah, we're conquering way, way too quickly here. Public order at 0% still, even with such a low population. Now, I wonder if part of the issue is something else. Do they have occultic stuff? No, they've got King's Feasts. All right, well, that's fine. I think part of the issue, though, is that the official alignment here is Ways of the Shadow Cult, and so Ways of the West are causing a huge problem here. So because of the region, if we take a look here, Shadow Cult 75%. This is a settlement that begins in a Dunabar's possession, and so if you take this as a Ways of the West kingdom like Rohan or the Reunited Kingdom, then you may have some unrest penalties if you try to convert, and that looks like that's what Rohan did. But they converted a little too quickly. So we've got some bad unrest here, but if we can weather it for a couple of turns, we may be okay. We may get down to 65 or so. Garrison is fine. We're at 80% of the garrison, and again, the population is nice and low. So it's just an issue of alignment. Should sort itself out in a little while. But I will go ahead, even though it's fabulously expensive, I think I will go ahead and restore the fiefdom dominion, the market, and the wooden wall. That does give some bonuses. And Lord's Palace, yeah, just for the emissary. I mean, this is the kind of thing you would not ever dream of attempting if you didn't have hundreds of thousands of Mirian just in your pocket. So hopefully we won't get a huge rebellion next season, and we'll see how that goes. Our fleets are continuing to move north, so we'll send them up in that direction. We've had a few attempts by the Reunited Kingdom to get their ships out and around and cause some trouble, but I'm really not too concerned about it. They don't have much in terms of land forces in the region. We do have a spy over here, so we can take a look at what they have. Yeah, it's a lot of empty cities. They've clearly been aiming their armies to the east, and so that has been, good for us in terms of wearing them down and making them not so much of a threat. Well, we did have a bit of a surprise siege here on the AI's turn. Rohan has assembled a pretty decent stack out of Dunfrecca, apparently, and moved it in. They've got some high-tier stuff here. They've got Guards of the King's House, 2 units of them. They've got a couple units of Rittermark Bowmen, or 3 actually, some other horse units, and a few assorted infantry. Not too terribly threatening, especially given the very nice defenses of the Hornburg itself. So I'm happy to sort of wait for an assault here. They don't really have anything else that they can throw at me, so if we can weather this storm, and then we can get our troops back up into the region. Take a look at Calenhad's public order, and yeah, it's back down to 50. So we're back up to 50 from 0. So it looks like we will be able to hold on. This is slated to gain another 25, so we should be back up in the blue after this. I think what I'll do, though, is probably move some of these troops out. There's really not a lot of reason to keep them here, especially given how good the garrison is. So let's see what we can get away with. Yeah, even with all these troops outside and just a bare 100 or so inside, we're still at 50% public order. So we can just march these guys up. This is certainly not the best force, but it might give them a little bit of a cause to push the assault before they're ready. So I'd be happy to allow that. Let's get our fleets back up into position here. We've got room for 2 more troops here, but this is not the army for it. This army is going to head over towards Pelargir. That's right. We'll disembark right here. I think, let's see if we can go right next to the settlement there. We can have a couple of mercenaries. Very nice. Put Pelargir under siege. And as you can see, there's just not a lot here. So what this will do is if there's any troops in the area, right? We've gone through with a scout, but haven't really found any large armies. But maybe there are some hiding in the woods. But if there were any, they would attack us. And if not, we're just going to take Pelargir. With the other fleet here that is going to be assembled here, we'll just move the ship back to Lon New Elanath and get all these guys into position. We'll send that either at Lynn here or Dol Amroth, but it's really not something we need to worry about. I'd say that basically at this point, the war for Gondor is over. It pretty much ended when we took Minas Anor in the last episode. And since then, with our massive resources, we've been able to impose our will on the Ithil region and basically move our protectorate up there, keep Adunabar allied or at least neutral to us, and basically wall off everything to the east of the Anduin River. And now we're basically at our leisure to move our elite troops into Gondor and take it over. So I think, again, this makes a pretty decent point for us to end the episode and the series. It would just be sort of mopping up at this point. But let's take a look at the Fog of War, or through the Fog of War, and see what the AI has been up to in other parts of Middle-earth. We can see here that, yeah, as we thought, the Reunited Kingdom is basically emptied its troops from the region, although they've got their nice token Dol Amroth units here. They've got actually a pretty decent variety, but it's just too small to make any difference, unfortunately. So if these armies had been joined to a larger force, that would have been a pretty epic and interesting fight. But as it is, we'd easily be able to deal with that. Over in the west, there's a few other forces, and they've taken Cowendruin. So possibly they could, over time, be able to put something together. But I just think that given the fact we've got another full stack right here, and we're going to be rapidly taking these settlements from them, it's basically all over for Gondor. For Dunland, they have not managed to hold on to Lond Dare, and they have not made too much progress in the north beyond Tharbad. It's nice to see that they have taken it, and they're engaged with moving into Arnor, taking 3 ways. And very interesting to see that the Bjornings are over here. Oh, wow. Okay, so they've gone the High Pass to Rivendell to Lastbridge and up to Tardal with very large stacks. I know that I have seen the Bjornings do this type of thing in the past, but I've never seen them be quite so successful at it. So it looks like in the north, Tharbad is suffering a bit from having to deal not only with the fact that they were unable to kick out Adunabar completely, or the Reunited Kingdom for that matter, who has held its starting position in the north. But Tharbad has not been able to hold back from these barbarians. We've got Dunland coming up from the south for them, and very likely the Bjornings giving them some trouble as well. So interesting to see that. The Shire is still inviolate, which is interesting. A lot of times you may see Tharbad conquer it, but everything is kind of holding steady in that region. The United Kingdom actually doing fairly decently in the north, so it's good for them. They may be moving against Tharbad up here, but I don't really like their chances. Over into the east a little bit, we've still got status quo around Dale. Looks like, as usual, Dale is attacking the dwarves for no reason. That tends not to happen until a little bit later in a campaign sometimes. But Dale is moving into the North Rune territories. North Rune still exists, but not holding on too terribly well. They've got Fornhud, but they've lost a couple of their starting settlements here. They did succeed in getting down below the Kelduin, so that's very nice for them, but it's not going to be enough. Once Dale can sort of focus itself, it could deal with them pretty quickly. If it wasn't wasting time with the dwarves, no doubt they would have made short work of them by now. We do still have a fairly decent Rovanian force as well. And it's interesting that Dale has not really moved south at all. They've basically just moved east, and that has allowed Rovanian to hold very steady, but we've got some very, very large stacks converging south of Nerrig Zigil. So this would probably be the big threat on the horizon, is the Chiefdom of Rune. They have conquered up into the north, taking Thordram and Gwaithring. They got some exploratory forces potentially moving over into the west towards the Iron Hills, but otherwise holding steady in the region, probably waiting for North Rune to be eliminated by Dale before they make any moves in that direction. And here it seems like they were content just to take Erebos and just build up troops. So it's kind of hard to see what would come of this. If they were to really go to war, it looks like there's not an active war at the moment. no doubt Rune would win, but you just never know. So I hope you have enjoyed this look at how to Harad. Of course, at this point in the campaign, if you get this far, you've basically got it made, right? You can sort of do whatever you want. You can throw your money around, as I've seen. You can train the best troops and send them off in any direction. But part of the fun of this is holding back your hand a little bit, right? I wouldn't have been able to get to this level of ridiculous money and, more importantly, security if I had just focused on eliminating all of my neighbors, which tends to be, I think, what many people do with a total war game. You just paint the map, right? Well, I like lots of color in my paintings, so I am painting the map, but it's in many different shades, right? We've got the sort of pinkish red of Harondor and the different kinds of brown of Far Harad and Khand. And, if we were to go further, maybe we could have gotten some other protectorates as well. But this is close enough to our victory conditions that I'm quite confident to call it here. I hope you've learned something or just enjoyed the series. And give me some suggestions about anything else you might like to see. I've got a few ideas, but we will be back to you shortly. So thanks very much for watching. And until the next one, take care.